This is what I'm going to talk about today. I don't really know the audience here, but I'm going to talk a little about the scaling and where KB fits into that when we train models. So that leads us into the memory institutions. And we've been in the public eye. We're not so comfortable there, but people are angry with KB. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and also why we still do what we're doing. I'm going to talk a little bit about the data and the contribution to models, and also a little bit about the dissemination strategies that we have of our models. So first of all, this. Can you hear me okay, by the way? Yeah, excellent. Well, all good things comes in free. So this is true for Cajun kitchen. I think it's true also for Italian and French cuisine. But this is the holy trinity of Cajun cuisine. It's celery, onions, and green bell pepper. And as you know, this is a very sort of formative paper that came out 2020 about scaling laws for natural language models. And what they were showing is that the performance of an artificial neural network is determined by three variables. It's the power, the computational power, and the model size, and the amount of data. And when it comes to computational power, what KB are using are the Euro HPC system. KB was actually the first governmental agency in Europe to use that system. And we are currently finishing a project on HPC Jupiter in Germany, one of the biggest HPCs. We have 7 or 8 projects behind us. The model size, well, we use whatever architecture there is out there, acting a little bit like parasites. We don't develop our own architectures. And of course, data. And that's the sort of reason that KB are in this game, which leads me to this, the mysterious memory institutions. So KB has been around for a while. We have deposit laws from 1661, stating that everything published in Sweden, one copy should go to the library. So the collections are quite large, stretching 1,000 years back in time. And it started out with the books, then the deposit law has been extended to cover newspapers, radio broadcasts, TV broadcasts, also electronic publications. That is like newspapers and what have you, blogs and etc. So we're a governmental hoarder. We just collect stuff. And unlike one of the central sort of tasks of an ordinary library is to throw stuff away, we don't do that. We just keep, everything. So we have in Humlegården, that yellow house there beneath ground, we have the equivalent of 10 subway stations with stuff. Books is sort of perhaps the core, but we have strange things down there. We have a whole apartment from one of the Nobel laureates, Nelly Sachs, and we have coffins. We have, it's a weird place. This picture here, this photo is from where it was after the financial crisis, and Sweden sort of needed to kickstart their economy again. So that's when we got this sort of the stacks below ground in Humlegården. However, we're behind. The deposit laws are outdated, so almost everything we have is non-digital. So the physical collections are immense, but only a few % of them are digitized. So if you're gonna contact your member of parliament this year, please tell them to update the deposit laws. There is an excellent suggestion for doing this out there from a governmental investigation into this. So it's kind of easy. The politicians don't really realize what we can do with data and why it's important. Not only to KB, of course, but to the Swedish society. So you have tons of books. But even though we only have a few percentages digitized, it's still a lot. And also the inflow of data, the sort of digital and electronic part, the born digital part of the collections are growing exponentially and becoming, in relative numbers, much more important. Data, as the importance of data has sort of come to surface also in the public discourse. So that means that KB, the sort of, we've been, doing our thing, we're collecting books and etc. Now all of a sudden we're a bit in the public eye, as I said. So and from both sides. So people want us to share the data, both researchers and others who train models and etc. Or they wanted to not use data at all. So we're getting attacked from both sides. So when the DSM the added sort of the exceptions were added. That was the new year between 22 and 23, I think. And half an hour past midnight, I got the first call from a researcher. So in the middle of celebrating the New Year's Eve, he wanted to tell me that now it's free to just collect the data from KB and do whatever you want to do with it. That's not how that exception works, but still. So there's an immense pressure from the research community for us to share the data outside the house. We cannot do that because of copyright reasons. And there's also an immense pressure outside the house for us not to use the data to train models. Still we do this. Why do we keep killing kittens? So legally, this is the KB standpoint, and you're not getting any more out of me legally. I'm not a lawyer or anything. I don't have any legal training. If I knew when I started at KB that my life would sort of consist of working with supercomputers and lawyers, I didn't see that one coming. But anyhow, so we operate under an exception in the copyright legislation that allows us to train models based on our collections. And this exception is explicit for memory institutions. And we can do it as long as we train the models for research. So we cannot train models on demand, which sometimes, where are the sort of borders between research and not research? But if a public agency comes to us and say, it would be cool to have this kind of model, can you train it? And the answer is quite often is yes, we can train it, but we are not allowed to do it because then it's not really research if you order a model from us. I will leave the legalities now, because if we start that discussion, or if I'm in that discussion, I will never be able to escape from that rabbit hole. So, politically, though, and I think the discussion perhaps also in the public discourse needs to move here, I would like to make another analogy with another exception to ownership legislation. The so-called allemansrätten, which is a common law in Sweden, Norway, Finland, something that Swedes like to talk about a lot. It means that you can use private property, you can move around in nature even though it's private property. So you're allowed to raise your tent, you're allowed to pick berries, you can even pick berries and sell them or give them away. You can have your dog out there, and so everyone can use nature, as it were, even though it's privately owned in many cases. Allemansrätten. It's a common law, which is no pun intended, but not so common in Sweden. How does this connect to KB? This is, of course, the wonderful Eleanor, who got the Nobel Prize. It's not really a Nobel Prize, but almost, in economy in 2009. She writes about the governing of the commons. So we see the collection as the commons, part of the commons. Something, even though it's privately owned, we don't own the collection, others do, the copyright holders. But we still see the collection as part of the commons. So everyone should be able to use it. That's the whole point of a library. We have private stuff that is owned, but you can still use it. You can go to a library, you can borrow a book, and etc. And we want to extend that sort of view into training models. And we see the libraries and the archives as institutions of collective action in relation to these collections. And the collective action here is to safeguard, maintain, and etc. The collections, so we can do stuff with the collection. Now we're training models. In 10 years we will do something else. I don't know what that is, but we'll see. Yeah, and I think if you want to make that analogy with the allemansrätten, sort of what are we doing with the collection? Well, we don't go into the woods chopping down the trees, because that would destroy the woods, the collections. We do train models, which is in this case, and I know a lot of copyright holders who don't agree with me, and that's okay, but we're picking the berries and we're giving them away for free to academia. That's how we see it. So we train models on the collections, we distribute those models for free for the benefit of research. And I think there's another representative here for another fine memory institutions, the Norwegian National Library. Svein Arne, where are you? Oh, over there. So we're gonna sort of, we're not used to being forced to articulate this. So it's still a little bit sort of a diamond in the rough when we try to argue for this. But we will sort of, we're getting there. We're working together with the Norwegians on how we should sort of formulate this, because we need to. People are wondering what we're doing. Why is it important to use the data that we have in our collections, in the memory institutions? Well, first of all, we want to when we think about models at KB, we want to be inclusive, meaning that we want to include all varieties of the Swedish language. And we have those variations. So we can include data on all topics with all sort of sentiments, people who you know, are sad or angry or whatever. And all tonalities and etc. From also when it comes to spoken Swedish, for example, we can include all sociolects and dialects and etc. And this is very, very important from a democratic point of view, that everyone who lives in Sweden using Swedish or one of the minority languages or the language of the origin people in Sweden, they should also be represented in terms of language models. They should have access to tools that sort of reflect their use of Swedish and how they want to express themselves. And this is not something that can be governed outside of Sweden, overseas. We need to be in control here. This is also, of course, there's a security dimension to this. Who should have the best Swedish data? And when a lot of things have been said about this KB data, KB sometimes claims that it's outstanding and can solve every problem in the world. That's not true. Outsiders sometimes claim that KB data is practically useless and it doesn't really add anything to training models. That's not true either. Of course, the focus of KB so far have been smaller niche models for predictive purposes rather than generative purposes. So we describe digital objects rather than generating them. But that also includes generative models, because we use generated objects to describe other objects. So you can have a generative model, for example, like a llama or whatever, to describe one of the books in the collections. We have one of our models is purposely built just to describe Strindberg, August Strindberg, Swedish novelist who used to work at KB. So it's very sort of adapted, describing his literature, and also has adapted his tone, and he's always angry, so it's an interesting robot in that way. We have something internally that we call the Bremer test. So in our collections we have the collections of Fredrika Bremer, who was a late 19th century, early 20th century author, and she was very much in the a public person. She was a liberal forerunner, prominent one in Sweden. She was also a feminist, very sort of outspoken, and took many battles for that. She was also, as was very common in those days, I would say, she was a racist. So if you read what she has written about racism, etc., it's let's say it like this. I won't repeat it in here. It's pretty gross. The interesting thing here is what stuff of her, what part of her text do you want to remove when you train models? And nowadays, I think most people will hands down just answer the racist stuff. Yes, let's just remove that. It's worthwhile to remember that in her time, what would have been removed is not so much the liberal stuff that was, the 19th century was the big liberal century. It's not the racist stuff that was mainstream. It's the feminist stuff that will just go away. That was sort of shocking to people. So what's inappropriate is short-lived. It also has short geographical range. So what we here on this side of the Baltics find completely acceptable and mainstream, for example, explicit descriptions of homosexuality, is considered homosexual propaganda in countries not that far away that are members of the same union. So we are, in the name of free speech, a bit allergic to excluding data when we train models. And we don't really see that the models per se have bias. The only bias that we really care about is the bias vis-a-vis the collections. Can we represent the collections or not? We see it as the collections having a lot of structure. And they do. And every sort of aspect of toxicity you can think of, we have it. So the collections are, as our culture heritage, it's homophobic, it's misogynic, it's anti-Semitic, it's, everything you can think of, we have it. But that's the stuff that we're coming from that. So we need to know about that, and we can't exclude it from our models. When you apply our models, when you put them in a production chain somewhere to do something, then you need to deal with the bias and toxicity and etc. We have several World Heritage actually at the library. One of them is the world's oldest Free Speech Act. So this is kind of important for us. So we're talking a little bit about the quality of KB data. Is it worthwhile? Is it worthwhile for the question that Fredrik was asking? Should we train yet another model? And I think that question is relevant. It's becoming increasingly more important to actually ask that question. What can we contribute now that we don't have in the... we've been, of course, testing, for example, the latest Google model and from OpenAI and etc. And they are very accomplished when it comes to the Swedish language. So the question is, why should we also do this if we can have these models, as long as we can, use them locally, so we don't have to share our data in the cloud and etc. And I think there's we need to be very careful so we don't just train models because we used to train models. But still, we have something to contribute with. So this is just what I'm going to show you now is the results from when we trained and released our speech-to-text model earlier this year. And as per usual, the parasites from KB, we're using the OpenAI architecture, and we fill it with KB, Swedish data from KB and other Swedish institutions. And this is just the results, where we compare the KBLab Whisper model with the one from OpenAI, and this is the word error rate. So this is the rate of words that the model gets wrong. This is done in the proper way. We don't train the models on the test data and etc. So this is fair and square. And what we can see that we, by adding our data, we can improve the quality of the models substantially. And this is especially true for the smaller models. So we can even with a small model beat the really large OpenAI models, which is important. We serve the scientific community. The scientific community are not just professors, but it's also PhD students who don't have computational resources but still want to use models on their laptops or whatever. They want to have small models. So that's what we can do with our data. We can build small but very sort of effective models for different purposes. This is just one example, and this is more of the same. We don't need to go through this in detail. It says the same thing. We're better than OpenAI when we use Swedish data. How do we distribute these models? Well, we see the models as research results. Again, not everyone agrees with us, but that's how we see it. So we can redistribute the models openly. And we rely here on a sort of this was a mathematical idealized model that Granovetter came up with in 1969. It's one of the most cited works in social sciences, which is nothing compared with computer science, but still though. So his idea was that a society sort of in a counterintuitive way works better when it's dominated by weak ties. Because in social systems dominated by strong ties, you sort of lock in the information and you just share redundant information within the circles of these sort of groups. Whereas a society that is dominated by weak ties is especially new information spreads much more easily and quickly. So you get society as a whole that is more dynamic. So the consequence of that for us, so instead of costly application-oriented collaborations, many wants us to co-develop applications with them. We want something that is lightweight, distributed infrastructure that does not require membership for the one who are using our models. You should be able to use it without adding money to us or anyone else. And it should be in a sort of a framework that's lowering the threshold for just using the models, but still and aligns with the principles of open science and etc. And for us, the answer is, it's Hugging Face. Just publish the models here. They're free to use. And the question is, does it work? So the most common feedback I get from academia is, well, this is all good, but no one can use your models because it's too hard. And they're coming from a different, they're not data scientists, they're typically scholars of humanities or whatever. So this is too hard, and so it's the work you do, it doesn't really benefit society because no one can use your models. This is the total downloads of our models as per October, and we just passed the 6 million threshold there. Somewhere around here, when we released our first BERT model, I think the first week we had 1,500 downloads or so, and we thought, okay, so this is it. Bam, and now we're going to do something else. And then it's just, and around here, in the term between 23, 24, I thought, well, this is it, at least. Now it's going to sort of, and we're going to move on to doing other stuff. And it jumped up again. And again here, when we released, this is the Whisper release, by the way. I was sure this now is just going to, the number's going to plummet down to close to zero, probably, because what are you using the models for? We don't really know that because we can't really follow up on that. We're not allowed to do that. We think we're sort of, it seems like we are stabilizing here on between 150,000 and 200,000 downloads per month. And why do people download our models? Well, they're easy to use. You can use them locally. They're very small, and relative to their size, they're super effective. So, again, this goes back to the data. This is the memory institution data that are making our models that's so effective. I'm going to stop there, Fredrik.
Okay.
Thank you.